Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today we're back with another N5 initial reaction, this time for StarCo. StarCo is a very cool mercenary sectorial, largely based around the Outrage graphic novel, centering around Knauf and his little band of pals. Uh, it was very sad going to N5, seeing that there was no faction where the Outrage 3 could all be together in one sectorial. So I'm really glad to have this here, where they can all kind of be back together. And yeah, they're a very cool mix of units, a very cool story, Outrage. If you haven't read it as well, definitely worth a read. But this is a sectorial that's a very unique mix of a few different nomad elements, all of which have changed pretty significantly from N4 to N5. And I think StarCo has changed significantly as well. And then also having some mercenary elements like Catarans, Brawlers, all of which who have held up really quite well. But StarCo's always been a very unique faction to build and play. There's no other kind of mix of units quite like it, and it's very exciting and fun sectorial, so I'm very glad to see it return. So what defines StarCo? In N4, it really was sort of Knauf and friends. Knauf was very much at the center of the sectorial, as was Uhahu, with Emily playing sort of a lesser role. But if you really wanted to get good use out of those units, that's where you'd play them. Of course, a bit later down the line, Uhahu then went to Bakunin, which is now probably her best home. But that's really the legacy that StarCo's left. They're a unique mix of nomads with some external merc troops. That was also true in N4. But one thing that was very true in N4 was that they had very restrictive fire teams and unit availabilities. In terms of getting your fire teams together, you often needed to take units that you didn't necessarily want to, and to get kind of a good mix in there, it was very difficult. But they were still a very cool sectorial sort of coming from the lore. Now in N5, we've got the band back together. We've reunited the Outrage crew, which is great, and we've had really big fire team overhauls, really benefiting from new bonuses, new keywords, and just the new structure from fire teams. Also got a lot of benefit, as mentioned before, from the external unit changes and updates, which we've seen be true for most of these returning sectorials, but they have picked up a couple drawbacks, unfortunately. So, without any further ado, let's check them out. So here we are in Infinity N5 Army Builder with StarCo. StarCo has unlimited duos, one Haris and one Core. And first up here we've got the StarCo Fireteam, which can only Haris or Core. It has the Aguasil and Mobile Regatta as the link glue. Now Aguasils you'd really avoid taking in N4 StarCo, and I think that's still true now, if possible to avoid taking them, but they do have some useful aspects like being able to pure link with the Dactari. When we go down to the wild cards here, you've got the whole Outrage crew here, as well as Diggers and a Spectre FTO, where Nauf usually does want to be supported by a Doctor, just because he's so important but so fragile. So that's a really bit of a nice little bit of tech where you can link an Aguasil and a Dactari to then give Nauf an extra die and a Doctor to back him up. Mobile Brigadas 2, again, you'd usually avoid them in N4, but I think in N5 they've gotten significantly better, especially looking at the lieutenant options, where StarCo, sort of like Corregidor, is a faction that does struggle with a lieutenant problem. Then two Brawlers. This is the only space where you can really get Brawlers into a core team, where the PMC Fire team only accepts a Duo or Haris. Again, they're one of your possible lieutenants, so having the ability to take two Brawlers, one as a decoy, and then still build a larger team off of that is nice. And then mentioned the Dactari, but rounding it out is Senor Massacre, who unfortunately doesn't have a keyword, but he can still sort of, I can see you taking a Brigada, Machine Gun, and Hacker, and then rounding it out with Senor Massacre. That's not bad at all. Then to the Riot Girls Fire Team. It's really a mirror from the Bakunin Fire Team, which is really fantastic. Originally in N4, when you had the Riot Girls Fire Team in StarCo, Avicenna and Fiddler didn't count and have the Riot Girl tag while they did in Bakunin. This always came off as very weird and was really, genuinely quite a shame. So I'm really glad to see it rectified here, where this is a great little mix of units, though Riot Girls have changed significantly, and we'll talk about those a bit later. Now here's the star of the show, I think. I think this is the biggest overhaul for modern StarCo, is the PMC Fire Team, how that's been totally reworked. You can Duo or Haris, with Brawlers and CSU both having the PMC keyword, but really I'm only really interested in Brawlers. Brawlers are fantastic units. They've come out really well in N5. We'll talk a bit more about them later, of course. But then going down here, you've got a number of units who've also picked up the PMC fire tag, with diggers being, the most important. And we see diggers and brawlers share keywords in other factions, and they always succeed quite well there. So I'm very happy to see this as a quick little duo Haris, especially where duos are so important. Now the armored fire teams have always been weird ones in StarCo. You've got the Anaconda, the worst tag in the game, and you've got the Trip Hammer, one of the also not goodest tags in the game, who you can then build some kind of fire team off of. This is the only team where you can take a Cyclone, which is a bit of a shame, but you can strap your one Ermendino to one of these tags as well. But this is really a fire team you're never going to see on the table. If you're taking an Anaconda or a Trip Hammer, you're either playing a very strange scenario or something has gone very wrong in your list building or very wrong in your mind, all of which is okay. Then the Outrage fire teams. This is really the character's fire team, where you can just take Emily or Uhahu, again, probably more likely Uhahu, just strap Knauf to that, and that's a great little duo, which is great if you don't want to be spending a Haris slot to be giving Uhahu a special die, and you don't want to be spending a Haris slot to give Knauf a special die. So it's really a great piece of a fire team slot compression, where instead of having to build, different fire teams to essentially get both of these guys extra dice, you can just jam them together and still keep your core and Haris slot open. So it's a very nice option to have. Then wildcards, diggers are fantastic. They're one of the better pieces of close assault and sort of spearhead wounds you have in the faction. Spectre FTO picking up PMC is cool, but you're usually rather wanting him in the air. In Tunguska, it's a bit different where he can link with some super jumping people, but otherwise, StarCo doesn't really have that. Emily is, she's got a great amount of keywords. It's very interesting to me that she's the brawler keyword and the PMC. That's really just for the StarCo fire team. But she's always sort of been the ugly duckling out of the three. But we'll get to her in a bit. She's quite cool. Then, of course, Uhahu and Knauf FTO. Knauf FTO, that was one of my predictions. I'm glad to at least get 1 point on the board. So, let's start with the Aguaciles. Now, these guys, again, you're not really going to see them very much. You might see them for their lieutenant profile, just because it is the cheapest out of your three options, being the Brawler, the Brigada, and the Aguacil, but it does cost you 0.5 Swick. Now, I will say as well, I would consider StarCo to be a Swick-heavy faction. You do want the Swick for hacking, and also the Swick for your bigger guns. You're taking, for example, you're taking Knauf and Uhahu in probably every 99% of StarCo lists you make are going to take Knauf and Uhahu. That's already 2 Swick. That's already a third of your Swick. And you haven't gotten any other guns or backup hackers or network or anything like that yet. So, in that way, the Lieutenant kind of is a hard pick sometimes. And I think you're potentially looking other places for your Lieutenant. But otherwise, you've got a cheap hacker who's decent. But if you're looking for a cheap hacker, again, I think the Brawler sort of takes its cake there, having Sixth Sense. I'd much rather have the Brawler as my backup hacker, and fitting so well into a duo. So I think the Aguacil is really in a rough spot in terms of not really having a great niche, except for providing a die with the Dactari. I think that's really the only time you're going to take the Aguacil, is to provide that extra die when you just want to take, Knauf, Dactari, and an Aguacil to finish it off. Otherwise, in a bit of a rough spot. So next up, here's the AVA-1 train starting. You get an AVA-1 Cataran. Catarans are great little ARO pieces. Having a forward deployment is interesting, but really you're looking at this 1 Swick T2 sniper rifle option. Camouflage ARO pieces have always been good at just keeping your opponent honest and keeping them on their toes, making movements inefficient. And yeah, look, that's no different here. AVA-1 isn't necessarily a holdback. You are playing pretty irregular and off-the-table heavy when it comes to StarCo, so taking 2 Catarans probably would have been a bit of a stretch anyway, but having access to just this one is really nice. Now next up, the Dactari. Having a linked doctor, really, really nice, and you've got 2 pretty decent linked doctors in both the Dactari and the Brawlers, with the Dactari being significantly cheaper. Again, I think this is a good little piece to take in the StarCo fire teams if you're running Mobile Regatta, because you know, don't look at the StarCo Fireteam and throw it out just because Alguacils aren't good, because Brigada are quite good. So having a linkable doctor in there, that availability is really nice. Clockmakers, they're just really great engineers. You will take pieces that like an engineer, but you've got sort of a better auto take engineer in your Ermendino. So I don't know how often you're really going to see these clockmakers. It's not like you're in Tunguska and running Hollowmen either, or some of your big backbone pieces uh, are remotes in a sense. So look, it's a fine piece. I just don't think you'll see it much in the environment. So Raoul Spector, this guy is a bit of a gun, both in Tunguska and in StarCo. But he comes up a lot in StarCo, where, not to besmirch anyone's good name, but you generally have a little bit lower of uh, how good your troops are. So he's picked up a really nice little upgrade with the drop bears +1 special die. Just means he's getting them down, more often, but otherwise he hasn't changed much. He's still an absolute monster, both in his combat drop and FTO option. But really in StarCo, I'd be straying away from the FTO option. It just doesn't synergize incredibly well with other pieces like it does in Tunguska. But that parachutist is still absolutely amazing. You can just win games off the back of Raoul having a good run, and I've had it done to me by one of our local StarCo players, Kevin. So yeah, look, Raoul Spector, he's a great pick. Never gonna blink twice at taking him. So our first of the three outrage characters is Uhahu, hacking device plus whip 14 with total control, and pitchers. So she's your main pitcher model. You do have another one, but Uhahu's where most of the pitchers are coming from, and she's really great as a hacking device plus. You've got in this faction access to the full suite of aggressive vision control with smoke and MSV2, and white noise and decent guns behind that. So Uhahu, she's also really great in also being resilient, having no wind incapacitation. But where I really like to see her is in a mobile Brigada team under a Tinbot Neg 6. We'll get to the Brigada a bit later, but one of your new LT options since N4 is a Brigada Tinbot 6. And I think sort of how you use Valera or Jazz in Corregidor, you can use Uhahu in StarCo to sit behind a Brigada heavy machine gun, a Brigada Timbot 6, and generally be pretty happy with yourself. So Uhahu, she's an auto take purely on the back of one, being your only hacking device plus, you really want that access to white noise, and two, being your only linked pitcher. She's also no slouch, coming around a corner with an assault pistol. She's a great little piece. Love her very much. So next up, Emily Hadelman. She's the second of the Outrage three, and is a bit different here compared to other places. So in other factions, this breaker rifle profile has chain of command, and this grenade launcher profile costs you zero point 0.5 SWIC. So that's different here. Here, there's no chain of command option, which is fine. You're not none of you're not a faction that wants chain of command, so you don't really mind about that. And then not having the SWIC here is a bit of a special upside. So she's a funny model. A PS4 breaker rifle really is nothing to sneeze at, and with mimetism on top of that, she's actually pretty decent as a shooter. X Visor means that she can take long range fights, essentially just putting you and your opponent at slightly worse odds, but still being able to make a play. And the assault pistol's not bad at all either. Having dog is a pretty good skill, being a specialist is really nice. Number two isn't bad. And then just, if you do take the 24-point option, just having the option to thunk out a grenade if you need is really not that bad at all. Now, I don't think she's an auto take uh, as as much of an auto take as Knauf and Uhahu are. I think she's very much a sometimes food, but with how many useful tags she has, I think I wouldn't be surprised to see her pop up in a few different lists. She's very much worth putting on the table now, which wasn't always true. So that's a big note. We'll skip over to Knauf, where he's the final of the Outrage 3, and really, yeah, it is quite a good model. So, I mean, he's always been quite good, having MSV1 with Mim, and then in a link he has a Burst 4 multi-sniper rifle, is pretty brutal. He's also not bad up close. A Burst 4 AP heavy pistols, not bad at all. and weirdly has a little bit of close combat, but that's probably just to make sense of him 1v3ing Three Knights of Santiago in the graphic novel. No spoilers. You're never really going to take this decoy one. You're always going to go for the FTO because that's something unique that you have in StarCo. So again, look, I think he is pretty much an auto take. He's one of the reasons to be playing StarCo is to get a link to Knauf, but he is just one wound, one armor. So you do want to have a doctor nearby. You've got two pretty well. Sorry, you've got a lot of doctors. You've either got the Daktari doctor, who's sort of your cheapest solution to that problem. You've got your brawler doctor, he's only whip 12, so he's not great, and you do have some pressure on your command tokens, but he's potentially the most effective in terms of building quite a good link around Knauf. And then, of course, you've got Avicenna, who is a bit more of a buy-in, but is also a great doctor as well. Speaking of Avicenna, let's flick over to her first out of the Riot Girls team. She's just same as she's always been, no wounding cap with Doctor +3. Very reliable, great doctor that can get that pure keyword, but is expensive at 28 points. So look, definitely is sometimes food. She is quite a good unit, but not one you'll take all the time. Then Fiddler. Fiddler's gotten significantly reworked from N4 to N5, where this Burst 3 contender is actually quite deadly now, as it's got that T2 ammo. She's doing quite a bit, both on her own, if you take the climbing plus, or even the super jump on her own, if you really need some maneuverability, but StarCo isn't hurting for that. And then you can link her up with the Riot Girls as well. She's pretty good as a zero swick assault option as well. Let's say you've taken Fiddler Contender and say a Riot Girl multi-rifle. That's a good team that doesn't cost you any swick that you can push up with and take some names. Because as I said before, you are playing a pretty swick heavy faction with StarCo. The CC attack's really nice. You don't have a ton of close combat models in the faction. It's really just Fiddler, Senor Massacre, and the Digger. And look, 6-4 movement, she's quite fast as well. Big fan of Fiddler, like her quite a bit. I'm not as high on the climbing plus jackbots, but yeah, they're fine. They're okay. Next up, CSU. So these guys pure duo with the Brawlers and the PMC Fireteam. Really, they're just here if you want a template, and that's sort of the only space I'd really be looking at them in, is if you've got your Brawler team or duo or whatever and go, oh, I want a template, because you can still get a spec op with a nanopulsar. That's pretty nice. Synergizes well with something like a Brawler Sniper, for example. But otherwise, I wouldn't really be looking at these guys. It's just if you want a template in that link, that's also a specialist. Because if you just want a template, you just go and get yourself a digger. But if you want a template who's a specialist, which is a genuine niche, if you're taking a brawler gun and you just want a duo, and you want that duo to both have a specialist and a template, that's where this CSU 14 point comes in. Otherwise, you can pretty much ignore them. Now, the War Driver, it's got Sixth Sense and is a regular hacker for zero swick, which is actually genuinely really nice. We've seen kind of how powerful stealth is just in this last season. So having Sixth Sense on a hacker uh, means that even though there's not as much stealth anymore, no one's going to be sneaking past your network. And genuinely, as a zero swick hacker, that is just something that's nice to have in a faction where, again, you do have swick pressure. So the War Driver, I'm expecting you to see this guy actually quite a bit, and this is genuinely a really cool rework from the War Driver. It's just a shame he doesn't link, but even on his own, beautiful. Then we just got the War Core. Again, you're pretty irregular and off the table heavy. This isn't a faction where you're going to take the War Core very much. I'll give the War Core a D in StarCo. Then the Sacha, cute, but unlike some of the Pan-Oceanian factions we've been looking at, you don't really have a need for quick specialists or anything like that, and you're probably too pressured on your irregulars. Now Brawlers. I absolutely love these guys. If you've heard me talk about Brawlers, you know how much I love these guys. You've got the MSV2 Sniper, who's my sort of main pick here. You've got good access to smoke in the faction, and smoke shooting, even at BS12, is still pretty deadly with a weapon like a multi-sniper rifle. It's got some really great duos as well. Again, it's got that Sixth Sense. We've discussed how good that is with the young War Driver, but the little .5 Swick submachine gun cybermine hacker with 6 cents. Even though it is, again, it's whip 12, it's still quite good. It's still breaking that stealth barrier. And as a backup hacker, it's more than serviceable. And again, you can sort of see how this eats the Aguasil's cake, where sure, you can grab the Aguasil hacker instead that has one more point of whip, but losing that 6th sense, I just don't think is worth it. You've also got some specialist profiles. I don't really think the engineer's on the table for you, but I think the doctor is quite good, both just to get up its own multi-sniper and also to link in with Knauf or anyone else. Again, it is a whip 12 doctor. You do have access to Avicenna for, another 10 points, which is quite a bit. But yeah, I think brawlers are quite good. They synergize quite well with each other, and they duo really well as well. The heavy rocket launcher I know is also a favorite of one of our locals here with that X-Visor. Just putting on that pressure, sort of like how a Thunderbolt TR-bot does, and being flexible and active and reactive. But really, the MSV2 multi-sniper is the one for me. Now next up, Hellcats. These guys got a crazy buff, basically just from the paramedic, as the paramedic picked up a deployable repeater. So this guy just lands, drops his repeater, and then you can just hack away, and he can fly off and kill something, or do an objective, or pick someone up. There's just so much flexibility in the Hellcat paramedic. The Hellcat hacker also isn't terrible either, but I think you've got good enough hackers already, and I don't like that Swick. And you already know what I'm going to say about the Spitfire. I just think it's too much Swick, and the combi rifle can do a pretty similar job. But look, I think the Hellcat Paramedic deployable repeater, I've spoken at length about this in both my Corregidor and Vanilla Nomads videos. It's probably one of the better models in the sectorial as a whole. I wouldn't be surprised if I'd say most StarCo lists should have a Hellcat deployable repeater or a Bandit mine layer, which we'll get to a bit later. Then Senior Massacre, really great model, also one of your only good close combat models. Gives you access to Eclipse grenades as well, which is really nice, even in a disco bowling world. It's just a shame that he doesn't have any keyword and only really fits in the StarCo Fireteam. The only time I think you're going to see him is if you're taking a Brigada HMG, a Brigada Hacker, and then just adding Senior Massacre on the end. Really, I don't think you're going to see him in any other configuration, which is a bit of a shame, but he's going to be quite good in that configuration. Next up, the Riot Girls. So these guys used to really be the bread and butter of StarCo, especially the missile launcher. But they've changed quite a bit just with how the Frenzy rework has affected them, where when they do a wound, now Frenzy actually affects them. So you've got the Tinbot -6 firewall, which goes really well with Uhahu. We've seen that in Bakunin. But you've also got access to that in the Brigada here, so you've got a bit of flexibility with how you want to build your tin bots around your Uhahu. The Spitfire is still quite good and still a classic. You can push up with that and have it be less of a big deal when you do go Frenzy, because you're just hitting them with weight of dice. You can hide when it's not your time, and eventually you can just run off in a blaze of glory. I haven't really found the Frenzy on the Spitfire to be too much of a drawback in Bakunin, and I think it's going to be the same here. You've also got this multi-rifle disco baller option, one which I think is really good. Having that linked disco baller on a BS-13 means you can shoot that quite far, and as a faction who, look, as we said, potentially has a little bit of a lower standard of gunfighting, can be a bit fragile depending on how you build them. Having a disco baller as a get out of jail free card is pretty good, and it's also just a good forward assault piece as well. Just running up a multi-rifle with, pretty quick movement, throwing up disco balls in front of it, can fork with the multi-rifle and boarding pistol. I think it's really quite good. Now we get to two very interesting profiles. The first is the missile launcher, who I think is still fine. It's going to do its job, it's going to waste a lot of time, even after it frenzies, it's fine. But I've really been coming around on the Specialist Operative emitter profile, essentially as the new defensive profile for the Riot Girls. So shooting an emitter and ARO, it's not going to kill anyone, but it is going to isolate someone, which will stop an attack run. And that's really what's most important, is just making your opponent's turn not effective. It's not going to kill them like the missile launcher will, but it's going to make them ineffective. But most importantly, getting hits with the emitter doesn't trigger frenzy because it's not putting wounds on anything. You're just locking them down. So if you do want that game-long sort of bulwark that's going to be the center of your defensive strategy, I'd really be taking the emitter profile. And you can do this quite easily as well. You can just slap the disco ball or multi-rifle with the emitter. And then this having specialist operative is actually relevant because it means you can jam a duo like that together and still have a specialist in the team. It's a pretty big deal. So look, everyone who's been looking at the missile launcher going, oh, well, its day's kind of over. I'm not really interested in running Riot Girls defensively anymore. Yeah, no, I'll back you on that. But not running Riot Girls defensively, I think, is a mistake when you have access to this combi rifle emitter. Another really nice thing with the combi rifle emitter, it's not an ARO that someone can sneak under. You're taking advantage of the zero ranges from the emitter. Then from 24 to 32, you're just in your good range. And if they get closer than that, you still have a combi rifle and a template. So this is never a unit who you can catch in a bad spot. I'm really in love with this Riot Girl emitter profile and think it needs a lot more attention. So next time you're playing StarCo or even Bakunin, just give it a shot. I don't think it's been seen as much as of yet, just because in Bakunin, you can just crutch Cenobites for your defensive mix. So no one's ever had the need to actually try something new there. And it's also really nice as a defensive piece that's not going to cost you any swig. Next, the Mole Regatta. These guys have had a huge glow up, really just in how their just in how their profiles have been reworked. The main thing is they've all got a +1 burst boarding pistol now, which means they've all got a template or a burst 2 template inactive. And then you've picked up this new profile, the Lieutenant Tinbot Neg 6 with multi-rifle, who is absolutely, I think, your go-to lieutenant in faction, aside from the Brawler. This is great because you can take the HMG Mole Regatta, you can take the multi-rifle Mole Regatta Lieutenant with Firewall, and then suddenly Uhahu's in the link. She's got Hacking Device Plus, she's putting white noise on top of your HMG with the Mole Regatta, and she's protected by the Brigadas Timbot, a really great synergistic unit. You can also go old school if you really do want that kind of missile launcher. The Mole Regatta is a very resilient missile launcher, but really I'd be looking at other pieces for your defensive setup, like the Riot Girls, like TR bots, etc., Catarans. But no, Mole Regatta are really good. I think you're more happy to take them than ever in StarCo, where in N4 they're sort of a bit more of a niche pick, but I think they're going to become a mainstay in StarCo. So next up, Diggers. These guys are good. They've always been good. They probably will always be good. And having the Brawler and PMC fire tag is fantastic. It means they can just pure duo with a Brawler if you need, or contribute to a larger link bonus in a StarCo Fireteam. Bellissimo, A+. There is also, as well, just running them unlinked, which I think is absolutely something you should consider. Because aside from Fiddler and Senior Massacre, and sort of a couple of other, bits and bobs, like Raoul, who's great but very expensive, or a Jaguar who can do it, but it's hard for them to get there. I think the Brawler, the Digger, you can just run free range, have them run around, take kills, drop templates, fork with grenades, and generally have a pretty good time. The Anaconda, I'm not spending any time here. Worst tag in the game, never take it. Trip Hammer, I'm not spending much time here either. You've got better things to be spending your points on. I have seen someone make Trip Hammers work in Drew's lists, but I think you've got slightly better quality here in StarCo. Stempler's On, it's not one you can link with, unfortunately, so it's probably not one you're going to see very often, but it's fine. I'd just be looking at other places. Reactions On, I think, is a very important part of your defensive mix. Having the Thunderbolts just as a zero swick defensive option, easy to put down. You've got an engineer you're taking every time in the Dino, who we'll get to a little bit later. So really taking the Thunderbolt I don't see as a problem at all. The Vertigo is definitely a unit you can take. Look, it is a lot of swick, but you do have pictures, and you do have good network projection with units like the Hellcats. But StarCo is also a faction that does have good reach, good aggressive reach, where I really prefer missile bots in factions that don't have that reach. Units like NCA, who we've just recently covered. They're not really that fast. They don't have great access to close assault. So having a missile launcher to efficiently reach out and tag someone is really important. You can run, quite a good guided plan. It's just that you're not like Corregidor, where you've got Moraines and you've got sort of incidental spotlighting. And if you're spending resources throwing pictures, shooting missiles, maybe I don't know. There's multiple ways for StarCo to reach out and tag something. The Vertigo Zond is a pretty high swick way of doing it, but it is an effective way of doing it. So I think really it's just a pick your poison sort of thing. Nothing wrong with taking guided. It's just not quite as good as in other places. Or quite as necessary, I suppose. AVA1 Transductor Zond will catch you out sometimes, so keep an eye on that. Cyclone's a great piece, but only having not being able to link really sucks. Otherwise, the FOIA maybe this is a Spitfire Cyclone faction, but you don't really want to be taking an Evo hacker that often either. So unfortunately, though, the Cyclone is a really really great unit. Was one of the units included in the recent Victorian Satellite players winning lists, but just doesn't fit well at all as it's only available in the armored fire teams. Lunicods, they're fantastic. Having AVA1 is absolutely fine here. Just a really good little defensive piece that can also run up and cause a lot of havoc. Move 8-2 is hectic. Being able to walk 8, throw a koala, then walk another 8 and probably blow someone's head off. It's great, and having a repeater is awesome as well. Love the Lunicod. Uh, so again, you're not very much an Evo hacking faction, but you're not really a baggage faction, just outside of having baggage to reload young Uhahu. But it's a great idea to have one just to do that. Uhahu is your only pitchers, so having her constantly loaded is going to be pretty important. Now we get to the Skirmishers, with the new and improved Bandit being a pretty big deal for StarCo. If you haven't heard, you can basically ignore all of these profiles except for the mine layer, where we've got an infiltration reroll, which the math rolls out to it's about a 70-75% chance for you to land your bandit, who can either deploy a shock mine, or more importantly, a deployable repeater. If you keep this guy as your reserve, turn 1, you can just drop him down, drop down his repeater, already in repeating range of something you either want to hack or missile, and then you just sort of go off to the races. Aside from that, the Bandit is just a good sort of Fide style unit. A burst 4 submachine gun, as it's got the BS attack. +1 burst is really nice with MIM and BS 12. You've got a marker state you can sneak past templates in, and you're pretty serviceable in close combat. Also got a nice template in the boarding pistol. So the Bandit, it's really got it all. And I think is going to be one of the new mainstays in StarCo lists. And again, every StarCo list should probably be running a Hellcat deployable repeater or a Bandit mine layer. I think the Bandit mine layer is going to be the more popular option, at least initially, as people enjoy using this new tool. And now for a bit of a rough case, well, pun intended, the hard case. You used to be able to run this guy pretty decently just as a throwaway infiltration role. I had him used against me quite effectively by one of our local StarCo players, where you just roll the infiltration. If you miss it, whatever, but if you make it, suddenly you've got a shotgun pretty close to your opponent. Unfortunately, with shotguns losing their templates and the hard case not picking up a boarding pistol or even getting +1 burst on the shotgun, it's just not a unit you want to take. You've already got a regular pressure, and these units have fallen pretty far from grace from what they used to be able to do. Now, next in El Hawa, these guys are in a funny spot, essentially just by being virtue of one of your only killer hackers in faction. Because, look, you've got the Bandit, but it's only whip 12, and it's really more valuable as that mine layer option. So having a whip 14 killer hacker is really quite good, and again, you don't really have another choice. You're taking the Al Hawa killer hacker in every list in StarCo, I think, period. There's, like, you need him. You need that killer hacker. The other profiles aren't really that incredibly impressive. Surprise attack whip 14 hacking is pretty cool. These mine layers are just weird. You don't really care about them, nor the forward observer. But the killer hacker should be in every list. Now we'll skip briefly to the Ermendino, who's going to be an auto take basically in every list. He's your only impetuous smoke thrower, which brings in a lot of efficiency, but he's also an engineer. So he can patch up that reactions on pretty well. He synergizes really well there. And he also synergizes in throwing smoke on a 14 for your brawler MSV2 sniper. So they're only AVA 1. If they were AVA 2, you'd take 2, but you just take your 1. But you generally want more than one smoke thrower for your list, so really your only other option is the Corregidor Jaguar. Now Jaguars are fine, having a dogged chain rifle with a pistol, having enough martial arts to punch down with. That's all well and good. You've got Fizz 13 smoke grenades. The unfortunate thing is you can't link them. They're AVA 4, but they can't really be linked. You'll usually just take a Jaguar just as your second smoke thrower. Would have been really nice to see them get some opportunities to link here, but that's all right. So, now that we've had a look at the faction as a whole, let's take a look at some lists. So here we are with a couple of example lists. Over on the left here, we've got a more hacking-heavy list. Starting off, we have a Brawler MSV2 multi-sniper just in a pure duo with the Brawler hacker. This is to get that secondary hack from the list. We've got Uhahu coming later that has Sixth Sense. Sixth Sense, as we said, being really important to make sure your opponent can't just bypass your network with stealth. Then we've got the Bandit. So this is the key unit to really getting your network going in the first place. You're starting on the table with a deployable repeater, somewhere very close to your opponent's deployment zone, where units can already be starting in the net. Depending on the terrain you're playing on as well, it can actually be really difficult for your opponent to unpick that repeater. I've played a few games with the Bandit and Corregidor, and it can be an absolute nightmare. Also, just like a Fade does, just threatens your opponent just by being there as well. So a great little unit, and if he can break in, he can just keep dropping his 2 other deployable repeaters. Great little unit. We've gone pretty big though, because we're also taking the Hellcat Paramedic with deployable repeater. So between the Bandit Mine Layer deployable repeater, the Hellcat deployable repeater, and Uhahu, it's going to be impossible for our opponent to escape our network on our active turn. Then we've got a little Haris team here. Well, I shouldn't say little, a pretty nasty Haris team here. Of the Brigada HMG, the Brigada Lieutenant Firewall Neg 6, and Uhahu with the pitchers. So again, this is just going to let us get some really nasty white noise shooting on any MSV units. Also just a very reliable primary gun with the Brigada, just shooting 5 on 13s, is usually, with 5 armor and 2 wounds, is usually enough to make something work. Then we've got our Ermendino just being our Group 1 smoke thrower, and our reactions on here as well. So one thing to note with this first group is that you are under a bit of pressure with your orders. You have one order who's off the table in the Hellcat, and then the Bandit and the Ermendino are both irregular. So let's say you're starting. Let's call that starting 3 orders down. If your opponent then strips from that group, you're sort of essentially 5-ish orders down the toilet, where you're only really going to have 4 regulars left and then 2 irregulars. So that can be a bit rough if you're going first, but that's the price you pay for glory. Then group 2, we've got the rare case where you will take an Aguacil. You've got Knauf FTO and a Dactari, where the Dactari is really just there to support Knauf, and then the Aguacil just to get that glue, get that die, has a forward observer and another deployable repeater, just because we had a couple points left over. Then we've got our Jaguar as our second smoke thrower, an Al-Hawa, a necessary Al-Hawa killer hacker, and then the War Core with flash balls. So this list is going pretty balls to the wall. You're under a pretty heavy amount of order pressure with this. If you wanted to maybe relieve a little bit of the pressure around this list, I'd look at either drop the Hellcat or drop the Bandit, and just use those points to get some cheaper orders, get a baggage bot, and just let yourself feel like you're a little bit safer in that way. Then group 2, we're really focused on adding a little bit more close assault and also showing off that Riot Girl emitter from before. So you can see here we're actually running only a 5 SWIC list. If we made some other decisions, we could of course fit some more in, but I also wanted to show Spector in a list as well. So here we've got the Riot Girl Spec Op Combi Rifle emitter, great defensive piece as we were talking about before, linked up with that Riot Girl multi-rifle disco baller, giving you a level 1 Fireteam. In that team as well, though, is also Knauf and Uhahu. So you've got essentially 2 level 1 fire teams within the one core, meaning that whatever unit goes down in the link, you've still got a way to get that extra die. Knauf is there as your active shooter, and this team, you know, this team's also pretty happy to move up as well. That's one thing I want to emphasize as well. This is not just to sit at the back of your DZ team. This team is more than happy to move up into different advantageous position. As this Riot Girl emitter also has a combi rifle, you really don't mind about getting closer in with this Link team, putting the Riot Girl somewhere up on a building, sort of in the midfield. That's still a space where she can succeed. Then, of course, Uhahu just rounding it out with the hacking, protecting the team from hacking a bit, and then also having those pictures. Fantastic. Then Raoul Spector. This guy's going to be in your DZ like the Bandits or the Hellcat, but he's just going to be there murdering instead of projecting your network. Spectre, he's a great unit. He can get quite a lot done. I think you'll be pretty happy with his results. Then the necessary Al-Hawa killer hacker. As I keep saying, you just cannot afford to leave this guy at home. You need a killer hacker. Then you've got the reaction zoned and a Cataran, really buffing up your reactive network. So suddenly they're looking at the P2 sniper rifle under a camo state, going to be hard to crack. Reaction zones are always going to be annoying, and then an MSV ARO piece with the Riot Girl is really nice as well. We've got a Sulyat bot just to be reloading Uhahu. Then group 2, we've got a pure duo of the Brawler MSV2 and Hacker from before, but rounding it out to make it a pure Haris team with a Brawler Lieutenant, just because we do need that Lieutenant. But look, I really don't mind getting a pure PMC Haris team here. Having +3 to Discover on the Brawler MSV2 actually makes him decent at doing the whole Discover shoot nonsense through smoke, which really doesn't give your opponent any counterplay, which is quite nice. And look, if the Brawler MSV2 fails, that's a little bit sad. Hopefully a Riot Girl or someone can Discover instead. And then, of course, a Digger. He's just free range, though he could join this fire team if it loses some members. He's just free range at the moment in there to do some more close assault things. And of course, our mandatory Ermendino. So, thank you very much for watching. Please tell me what you think of StarCo, and also those lists. They look pretty exciting to me. I might try and get one on the table quite soon. But thank you again so much for watching. We've got more videos coming with the newly released sectorials, and Infinity the Dante Forever Ultima Ratio.